Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting, of course, at Panther-Lair.com. That's the website below. Don't click that. That's not a link, but you can type it into your search bar and go right to the site to get the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news you're going to find on the internet, and the best community of Pitt fans that you'll find anywhere online, I think. We talk about that all the time. You guys know what the deal is. You know what the deal is here as well at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We put out these morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday at least, every morning, just to bring you up to speed on everything going on in the world of Pitt sports, everything we need to talk about. And then, of course, we have lots of other content here on the YouTube page. We've got post-game press conference video, which we'll have tonight after the game on our YouTube page. And then we'll have our live show. We do our live stream every Wednesday night at 8:30 on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Next week, we'll do it after the Notre Dame game ends, so it'll probably be a little closer to 9 or somewhere around there. It'll be a post-game show. But if you want to make sure you don't miss any of it, you can always subscribe. Click that little button there on the right-hand corner of the screen. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and you won't miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. There's like 40% of you watching these videos who are not subscribed, so get on it. What are you waiting for? Just click that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything. There's no obligations, and just helps our numbers look better, and I appreciate it if you do it. So like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll keep pumping these things out and giving you something to listen to each morning. 15, 20 minutes of Pitt sports talk each morning just to get your day started. And, of course, the big story now is heading into this game tonight. Pitt hosting Georgia Tech at the Peterson Events Center. A bounce-back opportunity for the Panthers after the loss at Virginia Tech on Saturday. Virginia Tech is if we didn't think much of Virginia Tech because they entered that game with only 5 wins in the conference, we probably should think even less of Georgia Tech, who enters tonight's game with 3 wins in the conference. The Yellow Jackets are 11-16 overall, 3-13 in the ACC. They are 0-7 on the season away from home. They're 0-7 in the conference play away from home. They're 1-8 overall away from home. Pitt, by contrast, 6-2 in conference play at home, 12-3 overall at home. It's a game they should win. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's a game they should win, even more so than Saturday. I thought Saturday was a game they could win and probably should win. This is a game they absolutely should win. This is a game they absolutely have to win. You can't afford to lose this game. And maybe they can drop one more here in these final 4 games and still make the NCAA tournament. I would prefer not to find out. Particularly if you're going to lose one in these final 4, make it the Miami road game. Don't lose to Georgia Tech at home. Don't lose to Syracuse at home. Quite frankly, don't lose to Notre Dame on the road. Create as little doubt as possible by just taking care of business, which they've largely done this season. The Florida State game at home being the lone exception, really, of a game where they absolutely should have won, and it was, it was a bad loss. I don't think losing at Virginia Tech was a bad loss per se. It's a disappointing loss because of how they lost and how they could have won. But it wasn't necessarily a bad loss. Losing to Georgia Tech tonight would be a bad loss, and still feels a little too, it still feels a little too soon to make jokes about losing to Georgia Tech at home. But that's just something you want to avoid doing, is losing to this team. And I do expect this Pitt team to bounce back. They went into the Virginia Tech game, and it was a difficult situation playing at Virginia Tech. It's a good environment, and that's a solid Virginia Tech team that's been really good at home, much better than it is on the road. And I think they were up for that game. I think Virginia Tech was really up. And I actually talked about this on Friday, I think it was, on the Morning Pitt. Thursday, Friday, one or the other, about Pitt facing a new challenge. All the different challenges they faced throughout the course of this season so far, and even over the course of the last 3 or 4 weeks of games. They've faced different challenges along the way, and they've been able to answer the bell on each of those challenges. But what they hadn't really faced yet was the challenge I think they faced on Saturday, which is playing as the leader, being the team with the target on its back. And I think I don't think they had really been in that position until this past weekend. They hadn't really been faced with, being the team that other teams circle on the schedule. And I don't think Virginia Tech was making it out to be the NBA Finals when they played Pitt. I mean, ultimately, these guys look at it as, well, it's just another college basketball team we're going to play. But this is the college basketball team that's at the top of the ACC. At least it was entering Saturday's game. And I think Virginia Tech, when we talk about how well they executed, somewhat on defense, but also on offense, about how sharp they were on offense, how committed to it they were on offense, how much they hustled, and how hard they worked, and how focused they were. I don't know if that happens when Virginia Tech plays Boston College or Georgia Tech. They lost to Georgia Tech, right? I think there was a little bit of extra focus, a little bit of extra get up for that game. I mean, look, they had home wins this season over Duke, North Carolina, and Virginia. You can believe that the players were up for those games. And I think part of the reason they were able to execute at such a high level on Saturday against Pitt is that they were up for it. I mean, playing Pitt was a big deal for Virginia Tech. I really believe that. I don't know what their players said after the game, but I mean, I think when you look at the situation, if you come into the game and you are 5-10 in conference play and you're playing, the team at the top of the league, the team that's established itself as, if not the best team in the conference, then one of the top 3 or 4, no worse than that, then yeah, you're going to be up for it. You have something to prove. You want to show that you're, not as bad as your record looks. You want to show that you can play with the top of the league. And I think Virginia Tech wanted to show that. And certainly for for a couple of hours on Saturday night, they did show it. And they were up to the challenge and up to the task. We'll see. They actually are hosting Miami tonight. It'll be interesting to see if they can manufacture a similar effort and a similar performance against another one of the top teams in the conference, against the Hurricanes, or when they host the Hurricanes this evening. But as for Pitt now, you regroup a little bit. You took a loss. And we talked about this yesterday. It's a 31-game season, regular season. You're going to have losses along the way. It doesn't impact, or it shouldn't impact, the team, the fan base, to be quite honest, the coaching staff, the way it would in football. You know what I mean? Football is a different animal. You only play 12 games in the regular season. You've got almost 3 times as many in basketball. And so you sort of, I think, process the losses a little bit, I don't want to say easier. Losing is never easy. But maybe, you certainly have to move on from it quicker because you now have a game 3 days later. Quick turnaround from Saturday to Tuesday, which I think might be a good thing. Let this team get right back into the flow of it and go out and avenge, the loss that they suffered, that broke their 6-game winning streak. You start winning like 6 games in a row, you win every game for 3 weeks, it starts to feel like, you might not lose again. You forget what it was like to lose. Well, now they remember. And maybe they remembered a little bit of what they need to do to be victorious going forward and what they need to do in order to start winning again. And my suspicion, my thought, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking this, you probably do too, is that they're going to remember it when they play against Georgia Tech tonight. Not just because Georgia Tech's one of the worst teams in the conference, but because this Pitt team, I think, is old enough, mature enough, experienced enough, and they've been through enough adversity this season that they can bounce back from a game like Saturday with a strong performance. They have to get more out of Blake Henson. They have to. And you may agree or disagree with this, but I still believe that he's the X factor. He's the wild card that can, whose individual performance, maybe more than any other player on the team, can go a long way in determining success or failure, wins or losses. And that's not to say that, Jamarius Burton's individual performance doesn't go a long way. I think what it is with Henson, what makes him the X factor, what makes him such a wild card for this team is that I think you're fairly confident in knowing what you're going to get from Jamarius Burton, on a nightly basis. I think you're fairly confident in knowing what you're going to get from Nelly Cummings Nelly Cummings on a nightly basis, and Greg Elliott on a nightly basis. You didn't get it from Elliott in the game at Virginia Tech because he got in foul trouble and was limited in his minutes, particularly in the first half. But you more or less, I think you can count on 3 or 4 3-pointers from Greg Elliott. I mean, I think he's going to make those shots, and you can pretty much rely on it. And then a couple of drives, a couple of finishes, a handful of rebounds. You can count on that from those guys. Henson's the X factor, though, and the wild card, because it's when he's playing at a high level, that it truly puts the team over the top and makes them ultimately the most difficult to beat when he's really going. And the numbers back it up. And there are probably different players that you could find these sort of correlating stats with. But listen to Henson. When Blake Henson has scored 20 or more points 7 times this season. Pitt is 7-0 when Blake Henson tops 20 points. When he scores 16 or more points, he's done that 15 times this season. Pitt is 13-2 in those games. If Blake Henson scores 16 or more points, your Pitt is almost guaranteed a victory. When he scores less than 16 points, and you might have already done the math on this, when he scores less than 16 points, Pitt's 6-6. There are 500 team with a 500 record when Blake Henson scores less than 16 points. And is that a random arbitrary number I chose? Yes. You could pick 15 or 14 or 17 or 18, but I think the point is made. I would count if you get 16 points or above. I mean, I think you scored at a high level. 15, you scored well. Less than 15, you get into the 14, 13, you had a good game, solid game. You reached double figures. You get 16 or above, I think you had a good scoring night and you really produced. And so I guess I would look at these numbers and say when Blake Henson has a good scoring night and really produces, Pitt wins. A whole lot more often than not. What's the percentage on 13 wins out of 15 games? You can figure that out. That's your homework. You can do that on your own. But when he doesn't reach that mark, when he doesn't have a high scoring night, when he scores less than 16, they're 6-6. And the problem is, Henson, so much of it is the 3-point shooting, and he hasn't been shooting that well lately. He was 6 of 11 from 3 against Boston College, which gives him, over the last 5 games, a 12 of 34 mark. 35% from 3 in the last 5 games. And mind you, 4 of those were wins, right? Boston College and Florida State and Louisville and North Carolina. He didn't make any against North Carolina. He made 3 against Louisville, 2 against Florida State. And then he had 1, he was like 1 of 6 from 3 at Virginia Tech on Saturday. So he's 35% from 3 over the last 5 games, but that includes a game when he was 6 of 11. In the other 4 games, Virginia Tech, Florida State, Louisville, Carolina, Blake Henson has been shot 6 of 23 from outside. 26%. You can't have Blake Henson shooting 26%. You're not going to win most of your games with Blake Henson shooting 26% from outside. You're just not. And he has run hot and cold. He has not been the model of consistency. It's not like he's putting up big numbers every game, but when he does, Pitt wins. He's the wild card because of that. And you can say, well, when Nelly Cummings scores a lot, Pitt wins. Or when Nike Sabandi goes off, like he did in the first game against Georgia Tech, Pitt wins and all this stuff. Yes. But I think Henson is the guy because of his skill set, because of the matchups he draws, and because of just how he plays. He is the catalyst for this team succeeding. And they don't, they have other scorers, but they're a much better team and a much more dangerous team and a much more effective team when Blake Henson is scoring at a high level. The X factor and the wild card. I really believe that. And I think, he's due for a game. He's due for a game where he goes off. He didn't have a lot against Georgia Tech last time. I was looking at these stats a minute ago. In the first Georgia Tech game, he was 4 of 14 from the field, 2 of 7 from 3. Made 3 free throws, so he ended up with 13 points. But, you shoot less than 30% from the floor, less than 30% from 3. It wasn't a great game by Blake Henson by any, even though he ended up at 13 points. He needs to do better than that. He's not always going to be a terribly efficient shooter, but he needs to make 3 or 4 3-pointers, even if it takes him a lot of shots and a lot of attempts to get there. That's what they need him to do, and I think you need him to start heating up here in these final 2 weeks of play. He's just such a unique player. And he adds such a unique weapon to this team that, like I say, I think he could put them over the top. Other games that you are going to keep an eye on, other games that you're going to want to keep an eye on. Oh, one other stat on Blake Henson. All right. One other stat just on this, scoring 16 or less, 16 or more thing. He's been under 16 points in 7 out of the last 12 games. And Pitt went 4-3 in those 7 games. And in those 7 games when he scored less than 16. Like, they really are like a 500 team when he scores under 16 points. And those 3 losses they had in the last 7, or he scored under 16 in 7 of the last 12. In those 7 games, they're 4-3. The 3 losses, of course, were Clemson, Duke, and Virginia Tech. He scored a grand total of 28 points. That's 9 points per game. That's not good enough. You need Blake Henson averaging double digits. You need Blake Henson scoring more than 9 points per game. You're going to have a hard time winning in most games when he scores 9 points per game. Actually, when he scores less than 10 or less, actually, Pitt is 2-2. So again, they're an average team. By the numbers, they are an average team when Blake Henson doesn't produce. So he needs to produce. Some other games you are interested in, want to be keeping an eye on tonight and this weekend. Figure, we are scoreboard watching here. And so a couple other games you need to keep an eye on. Virginia, of course, at the top of the ACC at 13-3. They are at Boston College tomorrow night. They don't play tonight. They're at Boston College tomorrow night. And then they go to Carolina on Saturday. Carolina, the big disappointment of the ACC this season. Their fall and underperformance and underwhelming performance, I should say, is a big part of the reason the perception of the ACC is that it's down this year. But it's still dangerous to go into Chapel Hill and play. And so Virginia's going to have a challenge there. I'm not sure that Boston College is going to be a challenge tomorrow night, except Virginia just barely escaped against Louisville and Notre Dame in consecutive games last week. Maybe the Cavs are a little vulnerable. Or maybe they got it out of their system and they go, beat the crap out of Boston College tomorrow night. We'll see what happens. Miami 13-4, right ahead of Pitt. In the ACC, they're at Virginia Tech tonight. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll find out about that Castle Coliseum environment and, how good Virginia Tech is at home. We'll see if they can repeat the feat. They did it on Saturday against Pitt. We'll see if they can do it tonight against Miami. And then Miami hosts Florida State on Saturday. And then Clemson, who's right behind Pitt, they're 11-5. They're reeling. They lost to they lost to Louisville over the weekend. Nobody loses to Louisville, but Clemson did. So after such a hot start, I think they've lost 4 out of their last 5. And fell to Clemson, which is particularly troubling. They're going to they host Syracuse tomorrow night, which will be an interesting game. And then they're at NC State on Saturday. Very real possibility for Clemson to lose a couple games this week and really fall into a tailspin, and tailspin their way right out of the NCAA tournament if they haven't done it already. So those are the games to keep an eye on. I guess the biggest ones, you can always hope for an upset. But Miami, Virginia Tech tonight is a big one. Virginia at Carolina on Saturday and Clemson at NC State on Saturday are big games you're keeping an eye on. In addition, of course, to Pitt, Georgia Tech tonight and Pitt, Syracuse on Saturday. Sold out, by the way. We wrote about it in the 321 column on Friday morning about how I thought that crowd was going to be crazy. As of Friday morning when I wrote that, there were about 24 single tickets left on the Pitt website. And Pitt announced a little bit later that those 24 or so were sold. It's been officially sold out. More tickets might get released because I've come to realize, maybe especially over the last couple of years, that people who sell tickets to events are weirdos, man. They do things that make no sense whatsoever other than the sense of making money, which I guess they're successful at because they continue to do things in this, weird backwards ways. But sold out game will have some tickets probably released closer to the game on Saturday, whatever that means. But either way, it's going to be an incredible environment. Pitt needs to go out and take care of business tonight, put a good thumping on Georgia Tech, and make sure the fan base knows that they do not want to miss Saturday's game against Syracuse. The home finale, senior day for guys like Jamarius Burton and Greg Elliott and Nelly Cummings and Nike Sabandi. Those guys deserve the recognition that they're going to get before the game. And I think the team as a whole deserves a nice send-off from the fans for the final home game of what's been a pretty special season. But before they get to that, they got to take care of it tonight and beat Georgia Tech. I think they will. We will definitely have a lot to talk about with the game tomorrow on the Morning Pit. So make sure you stay tuned right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Hit the like button on the video, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. That way you miss nothing that we do here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Stay tuned all night through the game tonight to Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to keep up on all the coverage from the game. Plus, the message boards will have a game thread going, and everybody will be talking about the game as it happens, and certainly after it happens. You'll want to check all of that out. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the game tonight and have a great Tuesday between now and then. We will talk to you tomorrow morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.